Greetings petrol heads, my name is the Tom, you're on my gaming channel and it's time for another episode of Automation, the car company tycoon game. Today I wanna discuss something with you guys rather than just building another car replica or anything, although I will obviously do some of those as well. But it is a topic that is all over the world in the automotive industries, and it is downsizing. Like, companies tell us that today's engines, on top of being more powerful, are also more efficient, more fuel efficient than the engines of the previous generations and all that stuff. And they say it's because of the downsizing. Like, if you're not familiar with the term, downsizing basically means you choose a smaller capacity but turbocharge the engine, and as a result get, according to the factories, more power and better fuel economy figures. However, is that true, or would we be better off with the latest technology in terms of cylinder heads and injection systems and so on, and put those on our old engines? Would that maybe be better? So I have prepared something. We have our basic car, the AMW Phoenix here, and it is normally a budget sports car, much like a Toyota GD86. So you have a little bit of a guideline what kind of car this is. So what I'm aiming at is 200 horsepower here, and I've prepared 4 different engines. Let's look a little bit into them a little bit deeper. First of all, I'd like to show you guys the quote-unquote diesel version, because my argument is that if you want an economical engine, buy yourself a diesel, and the more you drive it, the more money you save by virtue of that fantastic fuel economy. We got 200 horsepower on all of those engines that I'm going to show you guys, just to avoid arguments like, oh, that engine is more powerful, that's why it's faster, and yada yada yada. Good. So we have 200 horsepower, 40% economy here, 374 newton meters of torque, very good reliability, but also a lot of weight. Now if you go to the trim, you will see later anyway, but I'm gonna tell you right away as well that all cars are geared for pretty much around 270 kilometers an hour. They're not precisely at 274 each, because that has to do with the rev limit of the engine, and some have a value of like 275 or 276 here, others have like 272, but overall it's basically the same. Like, the difference is so minor that it's really negligible. But anyway, we're here with the diesel. We have 200 horsepower, as I've said like a million times so far. We have 1222.8 kilograms, a fuel economy figure of 4.48 liters per 100 kilometers, a total cost of 11,312 point something, and we have 55 drivability, 50.2 sportiness, 36 comfort, 20.9 prestige, and 42.5 safety. Now all these figures are gonna be really important overall for the comparison of these 4 car models. Also, here we can see that the service costs are nearly $2,600 per year, but in return the reliability is very good. So let's see what it does around the airfield track. 0 to 100 takes 6.3 seconds. 131.29. 131.29. Okay, good. I wrote that down. And yeah, so my argument is the more you plan to drive your car, the more you want a diesel if you want if you want it to be affordable, because the fuel economy is probably going to be unmatched even in this comparison, so that, you know, the super fuel efficiency really matters. Next up is, yes, indeed, a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated inline 6, excuse me. 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. And there's a reason for this. Like, back in the 90s, BMW used to advertise their inline 6 engines for their smoothness, for their throttle response, and, you know, their overall, their drivability, their smoothness, and all that stuff. You know, their very predictable torque curve, which we have here as well, I would say. And I think the concept of a naturally aspirated, rather large size for an average car at least, engine type is something that has completely or almost completely disappeared for what I consider to be pretty insufficient reasonings. Like, back in the 90s, people would go like, oh, it's a big inline 6 engine, it's gonna be extremely thirsty and it's too powerful and nobody can afford that. Yeah, okay, that was the 90s, and to be fair, sure, those engines were kind of thirsty, especially compared to today's cars. But my argument is that with the technology we have today, a 2.5 liter inline 6 engine is not necessarily going to be very thirsty anymore. It doesn't have to be, it can be quite economical, is my argument, and would therefore be a viable option as a daily driver engine. Good. Obviously, I should also point out all of this, the interior, the suspension, the aero, the brakes, the tires, everything is the same on all 4 trims here. I haven't changed anything. You can, if you don't believe me, I can send you all the files and you can check it out for yourselves. But anyway, this is much lighter than the diesel we just had, about 130 kilograms lighter. The reliability is still very good, 75.3. The economy is obviously higher, 5.74 liters per 100 kilometers, and a total cost of 11,702. That makes it more expensive to build than the diesel version of the car. Keep in mind though that there are still no diesels in the game, and probably the values might be different from the 3-liter diesel car we just had if it were a real diesel rather than a petrol engine tuned to behave like a diesel. Okay, good. But back to the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated version, we have way higher drivability, 62.4, excuse me, 62.4. That is because of this torque curve. It is so predictable, like pretty much flat between 3,000 and 5.5 or something like that. And at first it climbs slightly, then it stays up, and then it drops slightly. This is like your ideal torque curve, if you will, for drivability. And that is something you can, I argue at least, only achieve with a naturally aspirated engine. Also, we see that this car does 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.8 seconds, which is half a second quicker than the diesel we just had, and that is mainly because of the weight and the weight distribution as a result of that, because the diesel version had 130 kilograms more weight. Most of that came from the engine, so as a result it had much more weight over the front axle. But because this car is rear-wheel drive, in order to ensure it's got a good amount of traction, you would rather have a lot of weight over the rear over the rear axle, or at least as close to 50-50 as possible, or even you would like to have more weight over the rear axle than on the front. It's basically what I'm getting at. And this car has a 52.9 to 47.1 distribution, whereas the diesel was something like 55 to 45. So those few percent actually make a big difference, as you can see in the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour time. And on top of that, the naturally aspirated engine is much cheaper to service. So that is also something to keep in mind for if you're gonna compare the cars in the whole scheme of things. We got a drivability 62.4, sportiness 53.7. That's also quite a bit higher than on the diesel. Prestige comfort 34.5, prestige 19.3, safety 41.5. Next up is, it is a 2-liter turbocharged engine, because there's a reason for that, and it is that for a long time the 2-liter turbo was basically the biggest, and the top of the line engine for hot hatches or budget sports cars. Like also the Nissan Silvia S15 had a 2-liter turbo engine, and all that stuff. So we have, funnily enough, 30.92% economy here as well. That is exactly the same value as on the 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine. We have about the same gearing again, and the same interior as always. This car is 55 kilograms heavier than the 2.5-liter NA, because obviously it is turbocharged, and the intercooler and everything else you need for a turbo adds a lot of weight. That is also why this car has a worse weight distribution, and therefore a worse 0 to 100 kilometers an hour time, although it is pretty close. And oh, this is still the time of the diesel, so 130.38. Yeah, we have to run the 2.5-liter NA as well. Yep, and 130.38 on a 200 horsepower turbocharged car, but we aren't finished with the main stats yet. 5.18 liters per 100 kilometers is 0.7 liters per 100 kilometers more than the diesel, and it only costs like 160 even dollars more, like the diesel, than this car. So in theory the fuel consumption should compensate for the total cost. However, we can see here that the service costs are pretty low here, 2,237.57 per year, and the reliability is the same as with the naturally aspirated engine. So that is, in terms of running costs long term, this is a really good car. Low fuel, good fuel economy, low service costs, good reliability, although still not as good as the diesel. And but if you are if you consider these total costs, then the final car would cost like MSRP like $30,000 to $35,000, something around there. However, and if you are a young guy who just got their license and has rich parents and they buy you a car for your 19th birthday or something like that, the drivability of 50.8 really leaves to be desired, because if we turn the traction and stability control off, you're left to 42.1, and trust me on this one, 200 horsepower is not like unmanageable. But if you don't have very much experience with driving, it can get you into trouble really easily, especially if the drivability is this low. So that is another point to consider, and I think it is a pretty important one at that. Because if you, let's put it this way, the way this car is meant to, like the target audience is probably between 20 and 30 years old. Maybe like between 20 and 40. But in case a young guy with not a lot of experience should buy this car, then I think drivability will matter, or also for older guys with a lot of experience, because the drivability might show us that this car will probably be slower around the track than the naturally aspirated engine, and it only uses like 0.6 liters per 100 kilometers an hour less than the naturally aspirated version. So if you can live with just a little bit more fuel consumption, and therefore, but to compensate, the DNA engine had less service costs, and I think the NA version really has a good shot at being a very viable engine here. Also on this car the sportiness is 51.6, and especially if you turn those two systems off, you have 53.7 sportiness but only 42.1 drivability, and that for an unexperienced driver can really be detrimental. Just saying, it's mostly due to the engine type. Comfort is 33.6, prestige 18.5, safety 41.9. Good. I think we've covered everything here. And the last option is what the current trend is, and that is to replace the 2-liter engines, or what used to be 2-liter engines, with 1.6 liters. Let's see how that stacks up. We got one bar of boost. We got a reliability of 72.7, which is still pretty good, but the lowest in this comparison, and that might matter at some point in the future. Weight is 150 kilograms or thereabout, which is the second lightest. Economy is the lowest of all engines though. Let's see what that does overall. We get a drivability of 51.9, so slightly higher than on the 2-liter engine, surprisingly enough. I'm just curious to see what we have if we turn those two off, if it's lower or higher. 43.6, so it is higher than on the 2-liter version in all cases. The reliability is 75.0, which is still quite good, but the lowest in our comparison, so I gotta point that one out. Also lowest in our comparison is the total cost of 11,117.11. What was I about to say? Yeah, the service costs are actually only $10 per year more expensive than on the naturally aspirated engine, which is still the cheapest in this section. The sportiness is 51.8, and that puts it in second place in our comparison. It's close, only 0.2 higher than on the 2-liter version. The comfort is 33.8, that's higher than on the 2-liter version. Prestige is 18.1, that's slightly lower, and safety is exactly the same at 41.9. However, on the test track you see that it takes 6.1 seconds to reach 100 kilometers an hour, so that is slower than even the 2-liter version. Still faster than the diesel though. 130.49, so it is slower around the track. It's got a little bit better weight distribution because it's got less weight over the front axle, because the engine is smaller. Yet still it is slower from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour because there's the turbo lag. There it is. It's got no power in the bottom end, and that is exactly why I think the 2.5 liter will be even faster on the track. We got 5.27 liters per 100 kilometers. That's slightly more, surprisingly enough, than the 2 liter version. But overall, I think it is... It might be a close call which one is cheaper over a period of time. What the heck is this? Was this message? But oh no, 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 no. Not that one. This one, this one, this one. Okay. Good, so we have our 2.5 liter A. We would have to see what it does around the track. That's the sound. 129.55. So let's shut it up here. That puts it in first place in terms of performance. So nobody, to me at least, can argue that downsizing makes cars faster. However, I mean, if the amount of horsepower stays the same or relatively the same, because this car is not only fastest in a straight line, it is also fastest around the airfield track, and that should count for something. Like if you're a young dude who wants a quick car, then this is probably your ideal choice, not only because it's the fastest in our comparison, also because it's by far the most drivable. So let's get back to that scenario of a young guy, of a young unexperienced driver buying this car and unknowingly turns off the traction and stability control. You would still have 53.9 drivability. That is 10 or even a little bit more than 10 more than you would get on the turbocharged versions, and that really makes a great difference, just knowing that this car is more manageable. And overall, you know, it's gonna be a tough choice to pick a winner in this comparison, but I did some maths off camera beforehand, and I got my results here. Like, the scenario is you buy the car and then you drive 100,000 kilometers in it over the course of 5 years. So you would have to service it 5 times. Good. In that scenario, the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine with a fuel price of $1.20. Let's keep it in dollars because everything here is in dollars per liter, would equate to a total cost of $29,315.98. That puts it in the second most expensive place. The cheapest to run over a course of 5 years, if you only drive 100,000 kilometers, is the 1.6 liter turbo. Wait, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Test inline full turbo. Good. That is that the... Yeah, that is the 1.6 liter. Good. This is the cheapest overall, because I also calculated in the total costs in the formula, because what if every single part on the car would break in those five years? What would it cost you to actually repair everything? Or what would it cost to actually produce? What would it cost to actually... I think you know what I mean. Anyway, this is the second slowest though, both from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour and around the track. It is also the least prestigious, which is also something, you know, if you're a young guy, like 19 or 20 years old, and you got some friends and you're talking about your new car, and you turn up with a 1.6 liter turbo, that's not that impressive, dude. That has to count for something as well, I think. Overall, in the same scenario, over 5 years, this car would cost you $28,219.41 in my calculations, which is roughly $1,100 less than a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine over 5 years, though. So that's about what, $220 a year? Yeah, okay. Let's put it that way. Would you rather have the one that is slightly cheaper over the course of those 5 years, or would you rather have the one that's more fun, easier to drive, and faster? Just throwing that out there. And then we get to the 2 liter turbo. That is the 2 liter turbo indeed. Good. This car, however, has some pretty good advantages to it as well, though. For example, it is the second fastest round the track. It has the second best fuel economy. It is a good all-rounder. It comes in second place in terms of overall cost over 5 years. It costs $28,560.41 over those 5 years, which is about $340 more than the 1.6 liter turbo, so that's pretty negligible over the course of 5 years. And the reliability is just as good as on the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated version. However, it's got its issues with the drivability, and not only is a 2 liter turbo not very impressive either, which you can see at the Prestige, but also it is like the turbo kicks in a pretty unpredictable fashion, which is not due to my setup. It kicks in pretty early, so whenever you shift you have the power, and that's kind of mainstream in that aspect. But anyway, the turbo lag does cost a lot of drivability, and that is a point to consider, as I said earlier. And the service costs are slightly higher than on the 1.6 liter turbo and the 2.5 liter engine, and it is not as economical as the diesel, which we're gonna get to now. And you can see this is kind of close, all things considered, like in the whole scheme of things. Now we're gonna get to the result of the diesel engine, though. Overall, this car will cost you, over the course of 5 years, $29,683.66, so that's about $570 more than the naturally aspirated version, putting it into the most expensive place over the course of 5 years. Who would have thought that? I actually didn't think that would be the case, but I guess the very high service costs really make a big difference here. However, I argue that if you would drive 200,000 kilometers an hour in those 5 years rather than 100,000, which is completely conceivable, I argue that then this car wouldn't be the most expensive anymore. I think the naturally aspirated would be the most expensive then, and maybe the diesel would even be the cheapest run. However, around the test track it is the slowest, both from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour and on a full lap. because of the sheer weight of this engine. It's 56.2 to 43.8 on the weight distribution, and that you know, that is just inevitable on a diesel engine. It's just a heavy thing, and because of that, it can't put its power down appropriately. But it is a comfortable cruiser. It's got the highest comfort value in the comparison because of the turbocharged inline-6. It runs really quietly and smoothly. Excuse me. Yeah, it runs quietly and smoothly, and it's also the most prestigious car here because of the capacity of 3 liters. That makes it the biggest here, and it's also got the most torque. I don't know if that affects prestige. I don't think it does, but still, yeah, the service costs are the highest, but so is the reliability and the weight and the comfort. So as a daily driver, which one would you guys rather have? Let me know in the comments below, or on facebook.com/thetomgamingchannel. I welcome every single piece of mind, every single comment, every single information or opinion on the matter. Personally, I would probably go for the 2.5 liter in A, because I think it is still a viable choice. It is fast, it is very drivable, it is not terribly thirsty, which is my primary argument of this episode, that a naturally aspirated, slightly bigger than average engine is not necessarily very thirsty anymore in today's age with the technology that we have. And also, it is probably the most fun, because listen to that noise. However, if I were to choose a reasonable engine, I would go for... Actually, I might still go for this, because... What is the reliability here? 73.4. Like, that is a value that tells you, as long as you service it once per year and make the oil changes as you should, then you're not gonna run into any trouble with the engine. That is what a value this high tells you. And yeah, but I'd like to hear your opinions. Do you think a big naturally aspirated engine is old-fashioned and we should move with the time and go for downsizing, a smaller capacity turbocharged engine with, as we've seen, better economy but less reliability? Or do you think we should go back to our roots, go back to the naturally aspirated engines, except that they use slightly more fuel than the turbocharged versions, but significantly less than what they used to? Or do you think a diesel is the way to go if you want a cheap and affordable car when it comes to running costs? Just let me know in the comments or on facebook.com/thetomgamingchannel. And that marks the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please click the like button, it helps out a great deal. Also consider subscribing for more content in the future and for more videos like this in the future. I think I'm going to make a another episode of downsizing, yes or no, but in the sports car / supercar category. Stay tuned for that. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.